1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. While many of us were taught this phrase in school, I learned this from a Frosted Mini Wheats commercial. Now, whether or not we should celebrate Columbus Day is a topic revolving with much controversy. However, it is important to note that it marked the commencement of a new world, and if it had not been for him and the collision of many worlds which soon followed, none of us would be where we are today. In fact, many of us, myself included, would most likely not be here at all. And quite frankly, I very much enjoy existing. With a mission for glory, God, and gold, European conquistadors had very little compassion for the native people of the Americas. The world saw many new colonies born and watched them grow to become fledgling countries that were wielded through the hardships of being the forgotten child of the crown. And among the many countries that rose out of the ashes of colonialism was the land of the free and the home of the brave. And despite the young nation's rebellion and resentment against the British crown, they soon showed the world that the apple did not in fact fall far from the tree when they undertook the ambition to stretch from sea to shining sea. And America soon showed the world that their sun would now not only rise at the Atlantic in the east, but set at the Pacific in the west. And as plantation men joined the caravan to build the nation's railroads, America saw the birth of the Wild Wild West. And perhaps one of the most infamous characters of the Wild West is a cowboy. And a cowboy is not complete without his hat. Now, the other day I was on YouTube, and in my recommendations was a video about how Stetson cowboy hats are made. And they look a little something like this. As expected, the video explained the process required to make the hat while also giving a brief history lesson on the origins of the hat itself. I scrolled down to the comment sections like I usually do when I'm watching a YouTube video, and most of the comments were dedicated to praising the craftsmanship of the Stetson. But then I bumped into a certain comment. This comment claimed that the cowboy hat was stolen from Mexicans by white people. And what soon followed was a very heated discussion thread between the original commenter, who defended the Mexican origins of the cowboy hat, with another fellow who defended the American origins of the hat. Now, what if I told you that besides a few minor details in their arguments, both men were in fact correct? And what if I told you that this entire argument could have been avoided if both men had chosen to shift perspectives and break past cultural isolation? They were only trying to defend a culture which they had pride in, a culture which was theirs. And I'm sure any of us would jump to defend our own culture if somebody told us that it wasn't in fact ours. What both men failed to consider before commenting is that despite the Rio Grande, which marks the border between the United States of America and Mexico, cultural ties are a lot stronger than any river current and a lot deeper than any line drawn on a map. In fact, both men failed to consider the historical relationships between the US and Mexico. Prior to 1836, Texas was a Mexican state, and it was later annexed into the Union in 1845. And despite breaking their legal ties to the United Mexican States, Texas failed to sever its long-rooted cultural connections to its former country. In fact, the original commenter failed to consider that in Mexico, cowboy hats are called tejanas, meaning they come from Texas. If we all chose to shift perspectives and break past cultural isolation, we would be able to break past many barriers, learn more about where our cultures and traditions come from, while also filling the void of ignorance. The costume, which I'm currently wearing, is the China Poblana, and it is attributed to Catarina de San Juan. It is representative of all of the women of Mexico, and it is representative of a woman's ability to maintain her identity. Now, one would assume that a costume which represents all of the women of Mexico would draw its origins from a Mexican woman. However, Catarina de San Juan, who was given the name of Mira at birth, was actually an Asian princess. And while it's hard to locate her exact origins thanks to a game of historical telephone, during colonial era, while her father's kingdom was being overthrown, her and her brother ran for their lives. And in order to evade capture, she hid her precious jewels and fineries within her garments. Unfortunately, She was later captured by Portuguese pirates and put on a ship that set sail towards Mexico, where she was later purchased by a Spanish family. At the time, members of the upper class sought to purchase women of dark hair and light skin, which were considered exotic and a symbol of status in comparison to the usual indigenous servants. Mira's world took a complete turn when she went from living a life of luxury to becoming a servant. And although she was forced to keep her identity secret in order to evade being killed, she still found a way to preserve her integrity. And she did this by making herself a blouse with a squared neckline, which was perhaps a small revolutionary act. At the time, maidservants could be easily identified for wearing blouses with round necklines and puffed sleeves, so Mira's bold choice to refuse such a style and opt to wear a squared neckline instead truly made her stand out, and people soon followed in her footsteps. The sequence, which can be seen across the skirt, is representative of the jewels which she had brought along with her from her homeland, and the shine that these jewels bring on pays tribute to the life of servitude that she had by cleaning. The eagle on the front of the skirt pays tribute to Tenochtitlan through the legend of the eagle and the serpent. And the Aztec calendar on the back of the skirt pays tribute to the indigenous people of the region. One can also see flowers and butterflies across the dress, which pay tribute to the flora and fauna, and the red, white, and green color scheme pay tribute to the flag. Now, what is truly beautiful about the China Poblana, which is representative of all of the women of Mexico, is that it is a symbol of the beauty that is born when different cultures meet and become one. It's crazy to think that a man stepping onto a ship 527 years ago led to this very moment where I stand before you holding this hat and wearing this dress. And while Columbus may not be the hero that he is often made out to be, it is important to note that his arrival at the Americas was the onset of a perfect storm. And while it still may be drizzling, it's important to look past the rain and admire that when water meets light, a rainbow will surely follow. Thank you.